Welcome to Security Boulevard, the cybersecurity podcast from the Future Room Group. Each episode explores a variety of topics within cybersecurity and the technologies that drive it. You can find us on securityboulevard.com, the Security Boulevard YouTube channel, TechStrong TV, and all of your favorite podcast platforms. I want you to meet today's guests before we jump into the episode, starting with Fernando. Fernando, it's good to see you.
Hello, everybody. Pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to the topic. We'll get to that in a second. I do apologize beforehand. I am going through a nasty cold, so I'm an energy not at 100%. I'll do the best I can.
It's totally okay, Fernando. We, you know how it is when it starts to get close to spring, our body is like, what is this weather change?
Yes,
And then
and we're coming up with the time zone change, or not time zone, sorry. Daylight savings coming up next week.
Oh yeah, by the time this episode comes out, we will be close if we haven't already done it, depending on which part of the world you're in. Timeanddate.com is your friend.
Absolutely.
And joining us also is Mitch Ashley. Mitch, as always, good to see you as well.
Great to see you. Great to be here with all of you. Fernando, if I can give you some good news, you're getting over the cold before RSAC instead of after. So look on the bright side.
Let's hope. Yes, because for so many reasons.
Always. Great to be here. Great to be talking cyber with you guys. Enjoy
Awesome. It. And of course, I'm Tom Hollingsworth, all things related to security at Tech Field Day, which is a part of the Future Room Group. But let's jump into today's episode. Now, when you listen to your favorite episode of Security Boulevard, and let's face it, I hope they're all your favorite episodes. One of the things we talk about when we get to the end is we always talk about some of the research that our guests are doing as part of the Future Room Group. Well, today, we wanted to talk about some of the research that we're doing here at the Future Room Group. And specifically, I wanted to let Mitch Ashley talk about this because this is research that he has come up with that published about a week ago on February the 24th. So, Mitch, tell us what you have learned.
Well, I wear this hat of having a lot of practitioner experience in my background. About 2/3 of the time I've been like a CTO leading development teams in security products as well as SaaS and other things. So I can't help get away from some of that CTO DNA, kind of the architecture of things. And I thought, I think what I struggle with in the industry with so much happening all at once is how do you put all the pieces together and say, what's happening? And is this that, or is this something else? And so what needs to happen? And then also you combine, Fernando and I are always talking about the things to do that will make it easier for us to know that things are secured. And so as I was doing our research, one of them we do a buyer study. And that buyer study is people who are spending some money on software security. Fernando does one on security, and a lot of different topics in that. In my particular study, it asks about AI observability, a lot of observability questions, but AI observability and agent observability, AI ops, things like that. And in a 1-year period, since I did the second to last update to this, there was one AI automation in the top 10 of what were the drivers for looking at observability platforms. In this round, a little more than 12 months later, 4 are in the top 10, actually the top 6, frankly. AI observability, agent observability, AI ops, and also cost optimization, including AI as well. So the market has clearly recognized, just as one set of data points, that we need better observability. We need to be able to understand what is happening with AI. Now, let me back up for a minute. And then, Fernando, I'd love to get you to chime in too. So we are in this rush of recreating how we design and create software, right? The agents are part of that fabric. They are the fabric for a lot of the development. But we're also developing software with agents. So the agents themselves are being used to create the agents that are the software that we want to deploy into production. In the meantime, the enterprises are saying, wait, I need accountability for all this stuff. I need governance. I need behavior analysis. I need guardrails. I need governance. I need the ability to meet my compliance requirements. So before you deploy any of that at scale, I need you to address the security, compliance, behavior issues that we need, the visibility. I think Fernando's heard me say, trust is visibility. When you experience it, you can see it. Okay, I can trust it. If it's trust me, you might trust me, but maybe that's not always a wise thing to do. So that's why I came up with this idea of observability native. But before we get into that, that's sort of the long windup of where we're going and why observability is even elevated even more than it's been up to this point. Fernando, what's your
No,
thoughts?
I thank you. It was interesting because we were just chatting after the episode before we recorded. Like I helped review the initial research and really liked it. I think that this comes with this. It, it's 2026. We're talking about AI all the time, right? I think that this is a very useful frame a useful time to remind ourselves that specifically when it comes to security, right? And we'll get to the observability part in a second. But specifically when it comes to security, we always talk about three ways to look at AI and security. AI for security. I'm taking AI capabilities, I'm deploying them for security use cases. AI SOC, AI in the software development lifecycle, AI in GRC, AI in data classification, and on and on and on. And like Tom and I are working together on something on SASE, AI and SASE, right? All those things, right? The other one is, okay, security for AI. And that's the challenge, right? Okay, you have your organization running agents and AI in multiple scenarios. How do you ensure trust? And to your point, Mitch, trust and visibility, absolutely, right? But it's more than visibility, right? Okay, how do you understand what the threat model is for that deployment of AI? Oh, look, I have an AI agent that is running on my machine that is helping me with emails. Oh, wonderful, right? And what is the how do you think through what bad things can happen with email, right? And then things flow from there, right? But the notion of securing AI deployment. The third one people don't talk about as much. I think it's important. It's the security from AI, right? It's okay. You have AI, even if you do nothing, right? AI is being used by your adversaries, right? Phishing, deep fakes, and so on. What changes in your processes to handle this? But while these three major areas are important, right? I think that the meta level problem at this is that we have as security practitioners to embrace the non-technical side of us. We have to understand the business that our organizations do, right? Because the failures that we're seeing in AI, they happen not just at the technical level, they happen at the process level. They happen at and when I say process, I don't mean uh, PS-EF. I mean the business process, right?
That too, but business
Sure.
process
But
too.
this is important because we are asking security teams and development teams and observability teams to better understand the processes around our business. Some of the most enjoyable time I spent in my past years has been on anti-fraud, right? And it was fascinating to see, okay, how fraud actually happens. That requires a level of understanding of how your business operates. And I keep coming back to that as we need to have that higher level of understanding of what our businesses are doing, right? You can't just be a security engineer who looks at an event on an endpoint and okay, fine, it's running Mimikatz. Mimikatz is bad. Great. Okay, whatever. Right. You need the higher level of understanding. Oh, look, this is actually a workstation that an administrator used for that a domain admin used for something else, and maybe that domain admin credential is there now. And by the way, that domain is actually our main corporate. It's not just a test domain; it's a live one. Anyway, the point being, we need to understand what's going on, and that observability drive that you're talking about is really important.
No, I completely agree. And I think that one of the problems that we run into is that we have fallen into a world where observability is critical, but there's not as much transparency as we would like. Because one of the things that we're running into is a lot of the things, a lot of the context around what we're seeing out there is hidden from us. Why do we do things the way that we do? Why does this policy exist? I think that from a business, process perspective, like we do this because of a regulation or we do this because of that. But even some of the things that you wouldn't expect to filter through there need to be visible to organizations that are trying to build an automated strategy that has closed loop automation on top of it. We, as of this recording, if you have been in the news, you probably heard the horror story coming out of Meta where an AI agent decided to delete somebody's entire inbox. Even though you kept telling it to stop, it wouldn't stop. And you're thinking to yourself, well, who would delete an entire inbox? Because you have the kinds of observability to say, we don't just delete inboxes. Like, even if we know it's an inbox we need to delete, we're more likely going to archive it for a period of time to make sure that it's not actually, there's nothing in there that we need. Or, there's a lot of other things that we would do rather than just effectively removing it. Or in the case of this agent, not just deleting the inbox, but deleting every message in the inbox one at a time or in groups of 10, because, well, why not? We didn't teach the agent not to do that. We hope that it had assumed that you shouldn't do that, but that's an observability transparency problem. What if corporate policy is we don't delete inboxes, that we archive them and then we, remove them from the server at a point in time or whatever? Is that documented somewhere? Is that written down somewhere so that the system knows that that's the way we do it? And if you're just sitting there shrugging your shoulders going, well, I don't know. Well, then why not? Because if you don't have that, you can't truly say that you have full observability. If there's something happening in the system that can't be captured, that can't be documented, and that can't be audited, then you don't have observability. You have a hope and a prayer.
And
Well,
go ahead, Mitch. I have something, but
no, I was just going to say that in the world we're operating in, we say in security, I might need to know what we have. What's the inventory? What are all the things that we need to secure, right? Whether it's environments, software, networks, et cetera. So we always do an inventory first. And the challenge is with AI, especially with agents, is in security, an ephemeral environment is a challenge, right? So that thing goes away. I need to make sure I've got that information, kind of your inbox example, Tom. When it goes away, I want to make sure I've got the information that I can get back to what was happening in that environment. Now we're talking about ephemeral environments where the code is ephemeral. AI is building code today in our development processes. But those agents can also create prompts in and of themselves. They could actually write code themselves if we allowed them to do that. And of course, that's the question. The interesting word that comes out now is I need not just visibility for trust. To your point, Fernando, I need accountability for trust. I need to know that end to end, what the agent is doing or all those agents are doing, I can be accountable or they can be accountable. Someone in the organization can know what it is and know that we've applied controls at all the right places and can verify that that's happening, even if it's an ephemeral environment. Okay, I don't know if I teed up what you were going to say, Fernando.
Thank you for bringing up accountability. It's a huge problem, and we will talk about that in a bit. The thing I wanted to bring up is that we need, and thank you for bringing up the Meta example. Right? I was thinking about that as well, and what happened. So I think it's important. This is the thing. I think it's important for us to understand how things work so we understand how they break. To the best of my knowledge, what happened in the Meta incident was that the instruction, do not delete my inbox, fell out of the window for the agent. Fell out of so the agent didn't know and just kept doing it, right? Which means that as we are deploying these things, we must understand how they work, right? We can't just say, oh, look, an agent is doing something. Very well. How does that agent actually work? What is the reasoning engine for that agent? How do I validate what that reasoning process is like, right? And that those are I'd say unanswered questions at this point, right? Because we are we are playing with the not with fire. we're playing for a scenario here where if we define the tasks constrained enough, current LLMs, under what their capabilities are, will be able to do them properly, right? Fine, maybe we can do that. Maybe we can do that within the context of software development. Maybe we can do that within the context of security engineering, of SOC alert triage, right? The challenge is what happens when we ask it to do things that is broader than what it was supposed to do, right? If I take in the human scenario, it's just because I'm a first year intern at my company is amazing at writing code, doesn't mean I automatically give them, here's our software, here's our software architecture plans for the next 3 years, please go implement it, right? We have to understand the capabilities. But your point about accountability is also, okay, who is responsible when something fails? And that is the thing that I was thinking about this in the shower today, right? Uh, because we are
because that's just who you are.
because we are the problem with that we're facing is that there is no recourse, right? If I make a mistake at work, if any of us make a mistake at work, right, we have social capital, professional capital embedded into what we do every day, right? And there is a negative consequence for us. Like if I make a mistake and I'm let go, I don't want to do that. So I am motivated to not make that mistake. Agents have no such motivation, right? And I think that's something oh, I'm sorry, I just deleted your entire code base. Oh yes, I am so sorry. So what, right? That drives me crazy.
But it's interesting that you bring that up because you talk about the intern example. And if I give an intern a task that's above them, what am I expecting? Am I expecting the intern to go out and get like 14 ebooks on whatever topic that is and spend hours or weeks of their time devouring it and then doing what I said? Or do I expect someone who I know isn't trained to ask for help? Because I would expect in a situation like that, if I am overseeing someone, if I'm training someone, that they would come back to me and say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not sure about this. Can you give me some guidance? And you can say, okay, well, I've taught you this and this is how you do it. Okay, now I'm learning, right? Whereas AI generally doesn't know what to do there. And one of the points that I think is important in Mitch's outline here is feedback loop actionality, right? You have to be able to have a feedback loop, take actions based on the inputs that you give it. But what happens when the feedback loop breaks? Because there's only two options, right? It either does something, or it's three options. It does what it's supposed to do, it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, like it breaks, or it does something it's not supposed to do. And that's what we're seeing, like in the example that we keep bringing up with Meta, where the bot ripped through everyone's email. What would I want it to do if it breaks? Like, if it halts, should it throw an email and go, hey, I couldn't complete the task because you didn't give me enough information or because it's outside of the bounds of what I'm supposed to do? That's what we expect the intern to do, right? Do nothing, break nothing. Versus, oh, well, hey, I know that you told me that you wanted me to do this thing, but what I actually did instead was something completely different that was unexpected. Well, why didn't you ask me first? Well, because the loop's not coded to do that. And this kind of goes back to the problem that we've been having with LLMs for the last 2 years. What happens when they encounter incomplete information? Do they tell you that they did? Or do they make something up and fill in the blank? Because their directives otherwise were just say something, make something
Tom,
up, whatever sounds good.
Let's kind of build on, I think, Fernando, the word you were looking for was context window, when things page out of the context window, right?
Yeah.
You lose it. So let me introduce this into our context window of our discussion. So, and we mentioned the word observability native, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing. There's a whole, we'll provide a link to the page that describes it in more detail. But just as a working definition for what do I mean by observability native, well, it's not software, it's not a product, but it's an architectural approach when you think of it a reference model, where agent behavior, and I'll break this down, is captured and structured first class telemetry embedded throughout the entire software development process, all the way into production. Even at that point of when you're in design plan mode, using an AI agent to help you with that, all the way to operating this, enabling, most importantly, machine speed, governance, and safe autonomous operation. Okay, a lot of nice words in there, but essentially what that breaks down to is a couple of things. One is, you hear me say the words first-class telemetry. What I mean by that is it's not something we capture later. Let's see what spilled out on the operations room floor for data that we could go put some telemetry about. Unfortunately, if we have some OTel information, is that going to help us understand what these agents are doing? And did they go through any of those three paths? And which one, Tom? So you referenced something called the loop, the feedback loop. So what I started with in defining this as well, you have to think about what agents do and how would you describe that. So the kind of structure that I created is this 4 steps that it goes through. An agent looks at what's the intent? What did you tell it to do? What does it think it's supposed to do? What's the goals that it's supposed to do? Second is reasoning. What choices does it make? And resources that it used to make those choices. Does it rely on what models? Did it do some procedural logic to create that? Why did it decide that was the path to go down? The third is the constraints. What constraints were applied when it was considering the paths that it might go down? Okay, well, I would normally go talk to this model and feed it this prompt, but I'm not allowed to do that. I'm not allowed to put in a prompt that says, how do we delete everybody's email boxes? That's out of guard. That's one of the guardrails or something like that. And of course, what was the outcome? What did it do? To your point, Tom, what are those actions that it did, didn't, failed, succeeded doing? So when you have those 4 steps, at least you have something you can now understand of what was it trying to do? How did it decide what it wanted to do? Did we control it, that accountability part? And then the outcomes. And if you have observability for those 4 steps, now you can start to understand what agents to do. Now that's easier said than done. In order to do that, we have to build that observability into agents as they're created, and as the agents that are creating them also need that observability so we can provide full accountability, because building agents is just a supply chain issue. It's a software supply chain. I mean, if I infected the agents that are building our software, well, I've just captured your supply chain. Same thing. So there are 7 other principles around this. One of them is around that AI, around the first class telemetry for agent across the life cycle. But I'll pause there. But I think that describes pretty well. Tom, this is relatively new to you. Fernando got to peer review this and provide a lot of input. Interested in your feedback or your questions, thoughts on this.
I think it's important to do this in the cycle because so many people want to skip to the 4th part, the outcome, right? They don't think about all the other stuff that goes along with it. Think about the number of people who just put in like terrible prompts. And then they're like, well, why did I get terrible results? Well, what was the intent? Like you have to define that. Like, think about people who don't write a rough draft of paper and then they get a bad grade. And they're like, well, why not? Well, because it's a jumbled mess, right? And then you've got to think through the reasoning. Every school student out there that's listening to this, which I hope we have a few more now, knows show your work. Why? Because if I know where your work is, I can see where you went wrong. And we don't have to back all the way back up the decision tree. We can start right here. Those things are so critical. What do I want to have happen? What is the intent? And show me what you were thinking, right? Like you've got to have that. And constraints, like anyone who's ever taken a test, especially a practical test, knows that there are constraints. I'm a CCIE, and there are constraints all over that test. Make the output of this command look like that, but don't use this command. I'm doing that on purpose. I'm trying to force you down a specific path of reasoning when I do. And I want to see how you adapt to that. You've got to iterate through that. That's why we call it a loop, right? And I think that that's so critical because people want to leave out the first 3 steps because they require me to do stuff. They require me to think. They require me to put my effort into the model. And I just want magic to happen. Well, if you've ever played D&D, magic doesn't just happen. You have to spend all night reading the book and learning the words and preparing the ounce of gold that you have to do to cast the spell. And then tomorrow it looks like magic because you spent all this work ahead of time making it happen.
In camp, so you rest so you could cast those spells.
Exactly. Like people just don't understand that there's a lot of prep work that goes into this to get the outcome that you want. So yeah, saying that from an observability perspective, you've got to have this iterative loop that you go through. in order to make sure that you're getting proper output. Because I bet you, if you spend more time on the first three and less time on the fourth, what you get out of the fourth is going to be a lot closer to what you want.
And
You won't know why you got it. Sorry, go ahead,
and the
Fernando.
thing I liked about that feedback loop when first came across it, that Mitch's work, is this is independent of your role, right? If you are the prototypical year one intern, right? Figure out intent, figure out reasoning, figure out guardrails, and then outcomes, right? If you are a senior experienced security engineer working with AI, figure out intent, figure out reason, figure out constraints, figure out outcomes, right? So I think it's really interesting. The other thing I picked out on Mitch's work is he does a lot of work on observability, like observability for, we're speaking primarily to a security audience, right? But observability is huge in DevOps and SRE and all those areas, right? And the thing that is interesting is that how close those areas actually are, and how to security. And I've been watching this industry for years, and there's uh, so many scenarios where you have this coming together of security and observability, security and all. Like I think I'm on record saying I never liked DevSecOps as a term, because I think that the sec should be implied, right? It's like inside DevOps, right? And it's really interesting to see Mitch bring this framework together, because this is something that applies well enough to the operations teams that may focus primarily on observability, but there's a ton of security insights here, and the same thing for the security teams. Sorry, Mitch.
No, I kind of liken it to, the whole shift leftward, and we've talked a lot about have we succeeded? Why didn't it succeed? Why did it fail? I think this is more about 3D security. It isn't shifting anywhere. It's like you need security everywhere. You need it through the process that you create the software. You need it through your security operations center. You need it in the ops. You need it in platform engineering. So why not engineer it upfront into what we're doing? And that's what I don't know any other way we can provide accountability about AI without putting those signals into the processes that we use to develop it and in the software that we develop in that process. Then we can potentially use those in the decision loop cycle. That's a really simple idea, but it captures the essentials, which is my whole reasoning here was don't create anything too complicated. People will go, blah, blah, whatever that meant. Okay, I can understand that. Now, there's 7 other principles that go along with this observability native. We've kind of talked a lot about many of them. I'm not going to go in through each of them or even go into them in much more detail. You can read that in the paper, in the research report. But it's a lot about this unification, this feedback idea, the signals being first class. I think things that most people would say, I agree with that. I know we don't do that in full, but that's what we should be. When I go to my observability vendor, I want to ask them whether they use this term or not. Talk to me about observability native. How is observability built natively into what you're doing? Whether it's security software, apps, productivity tools, development tools. I want to know that I can provide the accountability that my leadership and my industry, my regulators are going to require of me.
I love the conversation that you just had in your head out loud with us, because it's every conversation I've ever had at every place I've ever worked. Man, that's a really great idea. Well, then why aren't we doing it? I don't know. Like, is there a process? Is there a thing that we do? And to use the old axiom of, when's the best time to write all that down? Well, when you started. Well, when's the second best time? How about right now? Like, having a framework to work in is a great idea, because it gives you checkpoints. It helps you figure out along the way, are we still doing what we're supposed to do? And yeah, some things you feel are not useful to put into a framework or to have principles that you follow. You're wrong, because if you don't, then you don't have a reason to justify the things that you do. And any kind of thing that's repeatable, that is capable of being built upon, has those things. Like, we'll reference back to this, or we'll understand how this works, or, is this something we should do? Well, let's follow one of these things. And Fernando, to the point you brought up earlier about, I feel like not having sec on anything is kind of redundant because security should be integrated into everything. Boy, you'd think that. And yet we're still in a world where if you don't call out the fact that this needs to be secured, people won't secure it. Like it's something that, well, other than security professionals like us who just assume that everything should be secured no matter what, we have a hard time with that because it's friction, right? People don't want to be doing things that slow them down or that force them to second guess stuff until something deletes their whole inbox or someone hijacks their email and uses it to spam 1,000 people. Like every one of these mistakes was written in a bad security policy somewhere because we let it happen, right? But going back to what Mitch has written up here, like a lot of those things could have been stopped along the way if we'd have just followed some of these processes and applied them. And like you said, this is very focused on security because the name of the podcast is Security Boulevard. But a lot of this stuff works well everywhere.
It does. Just to share a little bit, because in doing something like this, I ask myself, well, am I tilting at windmills? Is this another DevSecOps of we should do this, but it never totally happens? And what inspired me to create it, part of it was working with folks like you and Fernando, just talking about security in depth about AI. Another part was also the industry's reaction to AI. Because AI is different, it's not deterministic. There's a lot of things that we don't control. This whole accountability, I'm not putting AI into production at scale without some things that we need in place. The markets responded. Splunk did its data security fabric. I'm not using the right name of it, but their data fabric for security. Dynatrace and Datadog are all rushing into the market, but they're moving upstream. They want to be part of the platform, part of GitHub's Agent HQ or Amazon Bedrock Agent Core. You hear these announcements over and over, or Google just updated their agent development kit, which is now really more of an execution framework than it is a development kit. But the announcements were all about, at least some of them were all about observability as well as development and planning and projects, et cetera, the whole life cycle. So the industry is moving this way, not because Mitch thought it was a good idea or because we all sat around and, kind of complained, waxing poetically, why doesn't it happen? Why isn't it happening? It is happening. And the purpose of the framework is just give us a way to kind of understand, where does this fit in and what are they doing and why does it matter?
Yeah, one of the things, like I go back to my soapbox of having a stink brother. One of the things I really appreciate what you've done is that it gives us it gives us the grounding to start asking these questions, abstracting away some of the technology details. Like, okay, we don't need to talk about OTel. We don't need to talk about syslogs. We don't need to talk. Okay, we're thinking about this broader feedback loop. We're thinking about these constraints on the environment. Let's talk about those. And then, so I think it's particularly useful in that sense. I think that you have, I go back to the fascination and the challenge that we have to deal with AI is this combination of understanding how it works so that we understand where it breaks, right? And then once we understand that, okay, how do we build our organization around it? It's funny that as we track AI developments and whatnot, I see lots of people. I had to find economics references, right, Tom? I see lots of people making references to Conway's law, right, which is that principle of organization that what you ship resembles your organization, right? And what AI is forcing us to do is rethinking what we ship. Therefore, in a way, rethinking our organization. So how do we help security teams participate in that conversation about reshaping your organization? Right? A little bit higher level stuff than usual, but I think it's absolutely important.
Well, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it there because we've talked a lot about this, but really what you should do is you should go check out what Mitch has written. Mitch, if people want to find out more about the 7 principles of observability native, how can they do that?
The easiest way is we'll provide a link in the description, but you can also Google or Perplexity, whatever you use. Just Google Futurum and observability-native. It's not a term that's used a lot. Well, hopefully it will be over time, but you'll find it really quickly. Or you can go to the futurumgroup.com/Mitch-Ashley, and there's posts there, but that way you don't have to kind of work through it. And I'm happy to direct people to it if you reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. You should totally check it out because there's a lot of great information there. Fernando, I know you're busy working on some stuff as well. What can people find out more about what you're doing?
No, I think that I'll point people to our main Futurum website and whatnot. I think that as we're recording this, we just turned into March, and which means that in about 21 days, I'll be at RSAC alongside Mitch, alongside you. So my brain is pretty much fried right now with what's going on at the RSAC. So that's where my mind is right now. Plus the some of the sassy work that you and I are doing and so on. So that's always fun too.
Look forward to seeing that, guys.
Yeah. And don't forget that we do have a lot of information up on our website at techfieldday.com about what we're doing around RSAC conference this year. I just actually published the schedule for the event. You're going to want to make sure you check that out, as well as all the other things that we have going on around observability and cloud and, well, security. But we want to thank you very much for listening to this podcast. And we hope that you enjoyed the conversation. If you did, please make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube with notifications turned on, or that you are subscribed in your favorite podcast application, because we don't want you to miss any of the exciting episodes that we have coming up. You can also leave us a rating and a review and a comment. All of those things help us reach a wider audience of people that might be interested in security. This podcast is brought to you by securityboulevard.com and the Futurum Group. For show notes and other episodes, make sure you check out securityboulevard.com, TechStrong TV website, or the TechStrong TV app, which is available on all of the things, including all that new stuff that Apple is releasing this week as we're recording. We hope that you follow Security Boulevard on X and Twitter and LinkedIn. Just look for